Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, anyways, man, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this fight that had just recently happened between Shakur Stevenson, who I believe was a former champion at the featherweight division, and Jamel Herring, who was a current champion, I believe the WBO junior lightweight champion. And this was a very interesting fight because I believe that, at least in my opinion, that this was going to be hands down the biggest test in Shakur Stevenson's career. And of course, Shakur Stevenson, a lot of people have heard about this kid because I believe he has a very good amateur background and he was very good in the Olympics. I believe he is a silver medalist and he was one of Mayweather's boys, I believe, that Mayweather picked up. I'm not necessarily sure if he still trains in the Mayweather gym or what, but I do know, however, that he ended up training somewhat with Terrence Crawford and sparring with Terrence Crawford. And you can kind of tell because Shakur Stevenson, he actually kind of reminds me of a littler version of Terrence Crawford. Perhaps even in certain areas more skilled than a Terrence Crawford because Shakur Stevenson, he may actually have even better head movement than a Terrence Crawford does. Terrence Crawford, he's a very skilled fighter, but sometimes Terrence Crawford, he does leave his chin a little bit too high up in the air, and sometimes he is vulnerable to certain hits. Shakur Stevenson, he also is vulnerable to certain hits, but you certainly would not know it from this performance. I mean, there was very, very little times in this fight where Shakur Stevenson really was hit flush. And I predicted that Shakur Stevenson more than likely was going to win by unanimous decision. I think Jamel Herring, I think that he's a tough dude. I think all in all that, he's done what he could and it was a very great win that he had over Carl Frampton, even though maybe you can debate that Carl Frampton was not at the best point in his career because he already suffered a couple of losses at that point. But, it is what it is. Carl Frampton still was the favorite heading into that fight, but there's a complete difference facing a dude like a Carl Frampton who is a talented fighter, but a guy all in all that's a little bit defensively irresponsible, and on top of that, is not around the same size as you. Shakur Stevenson, he's a dude all in all that this dude is a very talented athlete. Now, the one thing I would maybe say about Shakur Stevenson is that just in terms of athleticism, maybe he does not necessarily have a great power. A lot of the shots that he did throw on Jamel Herring, they did hurt him. I just wouldn't say that all in all that maybe he has the type of power for his weight class that say, some of the 135 pounders have for theirs. So he may have to watch out for that a little bit in some of those fights because if he is going to go up to 135 eventually, which I do predict that he will, or even if he faces Oscar Valdez next, which, I believe that fight is more than likely going to happen next, but we'll see what happens. I would be very interested in that fight. But when it comes down to it, man, Shakur Stevenson, he really put on a hell of a performance. I mean, you really could have not had much of a better performance than this. The only way that it really could have been better is if he would have stopped him early. But when you talk about putting on a hell of a performance, and, this was the biggest test of his career, at least hands down in my opinion, from what I've seen. If I'm wrong about that, then someone correct me. But when it comes down to it, man, Shakur completely outboxes dude. And I noticed from the beginning that Jamel Herring, he was trying to out-jab him with single jabs and all this other shit. And, Jamel Herring, he's a decent fighter, but he's never going to be an A-grade fighter. Jamel Herring is never going to be a guy that is looked at and said, what, and, and someone's going to say, wow, he's the best guy in that whole entire division. That's just never going to happen. Jamel Herring, he's a tough dude. He's a guy all in all that has decent power, but I don't think that he was ever going to be someone like a Shakur Stevenson. I just think all in all that Shakur, that he's way more gifted athletically, and on top of that, he's just someone that has higher boxing IQ. He's someone all around that just has a much greater skill set, and there's always a saying that, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Well, what happens when talent does work hard? We basically seen what the hell can happen. And Shakur Stevenson is one of the most talented fighters that I've seen at the lower weight classes for many, many years. There's really been some great fighters that I've seen pop out of the lower weight classes within a certain amount of years. Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney, Vasily Lomachenko, Gervonta Tank Davis, Oscar Valdez, and even some of the older ones, even though they kind of have a couple losses now, like Aleo Santa Cruz or some of the other guys. But these divisions, man, very, very competitive, excuse me, in my opinion. And Shakur Stevenson, what fight is next for him? I think all in all that it's going to be very interesting to see. But personally, if you were to just ask me to break down the fight a little bit more, what do I think personally went super duper wrong for Jamel Herring? Well, personally, I think all in all that I just don't know if he ever was really going to beat Shakur Stevenson if he had implied even his best of game plans. But I think all in all that he was trying to outbox him a little bit too much. And you can't outbox someone like a Shakur Stevenson unless maybe you have that type of ability. And it's to that point overall to where it's like, you got to know your limitations. And even his trainer, Bomac, who of course is Terrence Crawford's trainer, he said on All in All that you're going to have to go at him. You're going to have to throw more than just single jabs. And I think that he was giving him good advice. But Jamel Herring, not only do I think that he was a little bit afraid of Shakur Stevenson's power, but he was so fast. And Shakur Stevenson is incredibly fast with his hands. He has great, great hand speed. He was so fast, especially with that jab. I don't think that Jamel Herring was realized where the hell he was getting hit from. I mean, Shakur Stevenson, he was hitting that boy up all across the ring all the live long damn day. I mean, shit, he pretty much just whooped his ass. It is what it is. But when it comes down to it all in all, I give Jamel Herring a certain amount of credit. He showed great heart. He pretty much got his ass whooped, but it is what it is. That's pretty much what I expected. Jamel Herring, he's about a B or C class fighter. But like I said, this certainly was hands down the biggest test in Shakur Stevenson's career. Now, what will he do against the bigger name fighters like an Oscar Valdez? Or if he moves up to 135, a Devin Haney, a Vasyl Lomachenko, maybe even a Ryan Garcia, or a Teofimo Lopez, or a Gervonta Tank Davis? Who knows? And I've seen Shakur Stevenson sort of look at Terrence Crawford. I'm not sure all in all if he was just saying, look at what I'm doing to your boy, or if he was looking at him and saying, you're next, or I'm going to get you later on down the line. And, it is what it is. I think maybe Terrence Crawford may appreciate that a little bit, but Shakur does have to be careful. Because Shakur, he's not a dude all in all that I see that has a great power. Now, you don't always necessarily have to have a great power to be an all-time great boxer. But I do think that Shakur Stevenson, he is going to have to be a little bit careful. I do think all in all that he is going to have to be very careful with himself and that he is going to have to take some tests. I think an Oscar Valdez fight, I think that would be a great fight. A Leo Santa Cruz fight, I think would be a very good fight as well. Maybe even the fighter that Oscar Valdez fought last time. I believe that one Brazilian fighter who I actually personally thought beat Valdez in that last fight, as did a lot of people. I would like to see Shakur Stevenson in a number of fights. But I do think all in all that, if he goes up to 135, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad move, but, you do have to be careful there. Because Shakur Stevenson, he's not like a Floyd Mayweather Jr. or Terrence Crawford to where they're also gifted with that very long reach. And Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Terrence Crawford, for their days, they also had more power. So I think Shakur Stevenson, he can move up, but he does have to be very, very careful. But he is very defensively responsible. He has great head movement. I think all in all that he has pretty decent feet as well. Sometimes, I think all in all, maybe he can be a bit flat-footed in certain areas, but all in all, that's pretty much just nitpicking. All in all, his feet do look pretty good, so it is what it is. But when it comes down to the overall, Shakur Stevenson, I thought he absolutely looked fantastic. I thought that he looked great, and all in all, what do I think is next for him? I think an Oscar Valdez fight would be just what the doctor ordered. Will Oscar Valdez want that fight? Who the hell knows? I'm not necessarily sure, but we'll see what happens when it comes down to it. I've heard from many LDBC new media channels that Oscar Valdez has allegedly avoided that fight. How true that is, I'm not necessarily sure because you can't really trust what they say anyway. But it is what it is. Anyways, I'm very excited to see what Shakur Stevenson does next. I would love to see an Oscar Valdez fight next. That would be a super fight. That certainly would be an A-class fighter that I think he would fight because Oscar Valdez, even though he did not necessarily have the most impressive performance in his last fight, I guarantee you that Oscar Valdez, he's going to train his ass off for Shakur Stevenson, and he's going to try to be in the best shape of his life, just like he was against Miguel Berchelt. Oscar Valdez is a very talented fighter, very gifted fighter, very powerful as well. I think Jamel Herring, I think that he's a decent fighter with decent power, but I also want to see how Shakur Stevenson handles real power. I'm talking about someone like an Oscar Valdez, especially if he goes up to 135, because those fighters, that Devin Haney, he's not necessarily the strongest puncher, but even him, he's someone overall that he's going to have a little bit of pop in his punches. But if you're facing fighters like, a Vasyl Lomachenko or Teofimo Lopez or Gervonta Tank Davis, maybe even a couple of others that I'm not remembering at the current moment, those guys have real pop in their punches. And some of those guys, they may have decent reaches over you, or at least some of them. Shakur Stevenson, he's not super duper gifted in the reach area. That doesn't mean that he has a bad reach, but he only has, I believe, about a 67 or 68-inch reach. That's not bad for his height, but when it comes down to it, you're not a Terrence Crawford or a Floyd Mayweather to the point to where Floyd Mayweather had about 72 inches of reach, and Terrence Crawford, I believe, he actually has about 74. So some of those fighters overall, they're very, very gifted in that area physically. Shakur Stevenson, we'll see what he does. I'm going to be very interested to see what he does for his next fight. I would love to see an Oscar Valdez fight. I would love, love, love to see that fight. That would be a very interesting fight. I think everyone would love to see that fight. And then after that, if he's able to get past Oscar Valdez, maybe I'd love to see a Leo Santa Cruz fight or something else. Or if he wants to go up to 135, F it. Why not? It'll be very, very interesting. I heard him call out Lomachenko not too long ago. Lomachenko did just recently lose to Teofimo Lopez not that long ago, but Vasyl Lomachenko, that's a dude all in all that I know that he just recently lost, but he still is very talented and very gifted. And he would have to watch out with Vasyl Lomachenko because Vasyl Lomachenko, not only is he an A-plus skilled fighter, but Vasyl Lomachenko, he is a dude that, a lot of people, they don't look at him and say that Vasyl Lomachenko has A-grade power. But when that dude hits you, it really hits you. That guy really has very, very good power, and he has to watch out. So Shakur Stevenson, we'll see what happens. I'm going to be very excited to see where he goes from here. I think it'll be very interesting, but we'll see what happens. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later. And we'll just see what happens with this young champion, Mr. Shakur Stevenson. It'll be very, very interesting. I think that he's a great fighter, but we'll see how far he goes. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.